A 2011 study done by the University of Michigan Law School found that those 65 and older are the fastest growing segment of the U.S. population filing for bankruptcy. Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Laurel Hess and this is Comcast Newsmakers Extended Edition. Joining me now is John Potto, the John Philip Dawson Collegiate Professor of Law at the University of Michigan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here, Laurel.
That's an awfully scary statistic. Folks obviously filing for bankruptcy every day, but sounds like a fairly large percentage of them seniors or over 65.
That's right, and so it's the fastest growing age group within the bankrupt population. So if we slice people up into those under 25, those in the middle years, and going up, doing it by decade, the group that's 65 and older seems to be growing at the fastest rate. Now they're still not a majority. They're going up from 4% to 8% kind of thing. But there's still, you get worried when you start to see numbers doubling. Particularly if you think that once you hit 65, I'm sure many people think, oh, 65, I get Social Security, I've got guaranteed income. Why would they need to go bankrupt? And the truth of the matter is, we see it happening at an accelerating rate.
Well, and it seems easier to recover from a bankruptcy when you're younger and you're able to work longer and harder. And once you're to retirement age, if you will, or certainly a senior, maybe not quite as spry as you used to be, it's much more difficult to recover from that.
Well, exactly, because if you think about the whole sort of conception of our bankruptcy system is that, sometimes people have bad luck, they're down on the skids or whatever, and then they get a fresh start. And the idea is to discharge your debt and start working again and get rehabilitated, build back your credit score, and get your old life back. And we give you a little bit of exempt property you get to keep. But if you're not going back into the workforce, if you've reached an age where that's no longer a viable possibility, then the fresh start doesn't really help you much, because all it does is, allows you a discharge and then to go back on your fixed income or whatever meager source of income you might have.
So what are the main causes? Are we starting to see the first generation of folks retiring without pensions? Are we not there yet? What's causing this?
So, as will not surprise you, if when you get professors involved, they say there's a whole bunch of causes going on and blended causation. Certainly the fall of what's called the defined benefit pension plan has reduced the guaranteed income for elder filers. And so when that shifts away over to defined contribution plans like 401ks, there's obviously huge market risk, right? So if that market risk wipes out the retirement account is wiped out. And as you said before, the older you get, the less time you have to ride out the economic cycles and build back that 401k or whatever it's going to be again. What we found in our studies was we actually went out and surveyed people who had filed for bankruptcy to try to figure out what explained their downfall, what was going on. We looked at a whole bunch of possible factors. Was it job loss? Was it medical expenses? Was it irresponsibility with managing money? And I should say at the outset that some people doubt about, who's going to admit that they're idiots managing money? It's sort of an embarrassing thing to admit. And you'd be surprised that when you have these anonymous surveys that we've had very candid answers to these things. Like people can write out questionnaires and I was an idiot, this is what happened, I got scammed by this, my son is a X addict or Y addict, so people are very honest. So we feel pretty good with the qualitative candor of the responses. And so what we found was it's credit cards. Credit cards is the single greatest cited reason for this group going bankrupt. Just to put things in perspective, at least around half of the people who went for bankruptcy, one of the reasons they said credit cards was a problem. It doesn't have to be the only reason. They said we also had medical problems, I also lost job, divorce, what have you. The elder group, the 65s and olders, 2/3 of them were saying credit cards was a reason for my filing bankruptcy. And so when you start crunching numbers, like professors like to do, that's a very statistically significant difference. So it means that something with credit cards is particularly dangerous, or something's going on there with the elder group that's filing bankruptcy.
And is it because credit cards are easy or more accessible, or are they not paying as close attention and getting the best deals or rates they can on a card?
It's a great question. So credit cards have lots of good things and bad things to them, right? If you want to make a large purchase and smooth out the payments, a credit card is great for that. What we think is in asking follow-up questions to the people who filed for bankruptcy in our group is we tried to figure out why they were using the credit cards. And it seems to us that one of the principal reasons is that they don't want to, either they can't or they won't, have alternative support mechanisms for financial groups. So we asked some people, could you ask a friend or family member for financial assistance? Could you go to a charity or a church group for financial assistance? And we found that this elder group is answering that question less frequently, yes, than the rest of the population. So it could be that they're just, look, there's different things going on for different people. What it could be is that there's social isolation. You could have people who have, their families have moved away or whatever, they're on their own, they've never been married, so they just have no one they could help. Or it could be that they have family who could help, but they've reached such a situation of a point in life where they don't want to go down, and it's humiliating to go down to the next generation and say, I need some help.
Well, if you're a kid, even if you're a 40 or 50-year-old kid, it's okay to ask your parents maybe for a little financial help. They're your parents, but if there is a different dynamic at play when you're asking your kids.
Absolutely so, absolutely so. And so for whatever reason, like all roads lead to Rome, the credit card is an incredibly attractive financing vehicle for this elder group. And it could be that what it is the anonymity, of the credit card, right? You get something in the mail, you don't have to tell your kids if you're opening up a new credit card. It just comes in over the transom. Plus, because a lot of these people are in stable living situations, like they've got the same address, they have what looks like a very attractive profile to the lenders who are offering these credit cards. So if you find you've got some problem, let's say you're on a fixed income and your medical expenses have gone up, you want to plug a hole, credit card's a great way to do it. Or if you have an income shock, there's been an adjustment in your income. Let's say you've reached a point where you can't work the same number of hours, or now you've got a medical condition. They say, we don't want you on your feet as much. You've got to be doing a different thing. If there's something that sort of shocks down your income level, a credit card, great way to plug the gap. I can just charge this to my card, charge this to my card.
So what's the solution? What do seniors do who maybe see this coming? They're not at bankruptcy yet, but heck, we've got a structural deficit going on here. I'm not going to be able to work another 3-4 years. I don't want to declare bankruptcy. Is there a solution?
I think so there's no magical solution. As I said, depends on which path you're doing. If you're on the path that you're sort of stuck with inertia to a prior lifestyle that you can no longer afford because there's been a reduction in your income, then there has to be sort of a, to use the cliche, come to Jesus moment.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, you got to come in and you got to adjust the situation. So that is a solution, which is having a frank, candid discussion about what your financial situation is. If you're in the other pile, which is sort of like the hopeless, miserable pile, where you're just like on a fixed income and your meds have gone up and there's nothing you can do about it, that's just a depressing situation, and you have to go find like more public assistance or whatever because you can't draw blood from a stone. So for the first group, they can do something. The second group, there's not too much they can do. But what both groups can recognize is that credit cards are not a panacea. Credit cards are not going to help you. They look like they're a good solution to plug holes, but I have a co-author who uses this metaphor, so I want to give her credit for it. She calls it the cement life raft. Okay, it seems like something is going to help you, but it is not going to help you at all, and it is not an answer to a difficult financial situation.
Are there other factors at play? And I mean, I'm sure there's a million of them, but the housing market that crashed, 10 years ago, if people were, approaching retirement when that happened, or if they had a lot of money invested in 401ks, sometimes there's factors that are nobody's poor planning. It's not their fault, and the way it timed out with however old they are and going into their retirement, there's not a whole lot they can do.
No, there's not, and so the data that we got were even before the giant collapse of the market in 2008 and the housing market collapse. So for a good chunk of Americans who have hit that point of their lives, they have a good amount of their money in the housing equity. So when that gets wiped out, a whole safety cushion has been gone that they can't rely upon anymore. We also find rising medical expenses with the elderly, and it's not just like, oh, my Lipitor is more expensive. Okay, that's not it. What it often is a collection of that with other factors. So let's say your blood pressure is going up, or your knees are getting worse, or something like that. That affects your income earning capacity as well. And so what people might have thought is like, I'm going to keep trucking along, work until I'm 70, 75. Then they go see the doctor at 62, and they say, well, you're not going to be able to work those hours anymore. Okay, so then they're saying no poor planning of themselves, right? They're in a different situation where they can't make the income that they otherwise could, and that's what's going to be the catalyst for this financial distress.
All right, so now that you've depressed us all and scared us all, everybody take a good long look at your finances, especially if you're a senior citizen, and if you can make some changes, or if you see yourself on an unfortunate trajectory, try to turn yourself around before it's too late. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us as well. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Great shops, great eats, and great places. It's My Destinations, only on Xfinity On Demand. From Detroit to Grand Rapids, now you can check out some of Michigan's greatest destinations. Delicious pizza, Michigan craft beer, great family museums, and so much more. It's easy. Push the On Demand button on your remote, navigate to Get Local, and select My Destinations. It's My Destinations, only on Xfinity On Demand. Another way Comcast stays focused on the community.
welcome back to this extended edition of Comcast Newsmakers. I'm Laurel Hess. Joining me now is Associate Professor Susan Cancelloni from Wayne State University Law School. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Your specialty, you teach wills and trusts.
I teach wills and
and
trusts.
certainly would recommend one.
Oh, absolutely.
But
Yes.
if that's not there and someone passes away, what exactly happens to not only the estate, but any sort of debt after the death of not just a senior, but really anybody, but particularly seniors who might have children, fearful that perhaps that debt passes along to them?
Well, the short answer is unfortunately inconvenient because it depends, right? It depends on how any kind of debt is titled. So, for example, for most people, debt is going to be maybe a house, maybe a car, and credit cards. That's going to be the most typical one, especially for an older population. And in all of those cases, it's going to depend on who else signed for that debt. If the person who just died is the only person obligated for the debt, then the debt is going to become a debt of the estate. And that's going to apply whether or not there's a will, because the way the law works is if you don't write a will, the law writes one for you, right? You die intestate is what we say, and the law says, well, this is what happens to your property. If you don't tell us, we're going to assume that these people are going to get the money, if there is any, in this order. So if you write a will, of course, the will says, actually, this is the order that I want people to get money. But either way, it doesn't really matter that much. It's going to get handled in a very methodical fashion. So if you have a debt and you're the only person who's on that debt, so say a credit card that's in your name alone, when you die, your estate is going to be responsible for paying off that credit card out of any assets that happen to remain. But before they get there, the estate, which is going to be handled by a personal representative, is going to first pay off any fees and administrative costs associated with the estate. Then it's going to pay off your funeral and burial costs. I mean, sometimes, a lot of times, older people particularly are very thoughtful, and they'll have gone ahead and done a prepaid funeral, and so then you don't have those expenses. But if you don't have that, or someone dies suddenly and unexpectedly, especially younger age, those will often wipe out small estates before you ever get to debt.
What if somebody has a lot more debt than that? What if creditors have been chasing your mother or father or grandmother or grandfather for a while now because they have too much credit card debt and they're maybe on the brink of bankruptcy? I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios where people don't have a whole lot of money.
Sure.
And they pass away, leaving a huge amount of debt that now perhaps children feel they have to be responsible for and pay off. Are they?
Not as long as they didn't co-sign for that debt. So if, say, your mother dies and your mother had however many thousands of dollars in credit card debt and it was in her name alone, her estate could be responsible, but her family members are not.
So if there's no money in the estate, and the
credit card
creditor,
companies are out of luck.
Do they know that, or are they going to start hounding you for that money?
Well, I think they probably do know that.
I figured they would.
I think as a practical point, what happens is the moment that a debt lender, a credit card company, finds out that somebody has died, it gets turned over to a debt collector, right? And maybe it got turned over to a debt collector already, especially in the scenario where bills weren't getting paid. Well, you know, one hopes that debt collection agencies will be responsible and ethical, but clearly they get paid only as they collect debts. And so there are lots of stories out there about family members who are grieving getting phone calls immediately after someone has died from the unethical debt collector saying, you have to pay mom's credit card, right? And they'll really play on people's emotions that, well, mom, wouldn't your mother have wanted you to pay that?
Well, that's a good question. Morally, if you have the funds, are you obligated to pay off mom's $7,000 Costco card?
Well, I think morally is something that everyone has to decide for themselves. You know, is it your legal obligation? Absolutely not. If your name is not on that, it is not your legal obligation. And when someone calls you up and says you have to pay this, you should say no.
Can you, provided nothing is in your name and it was all in the deceased's name, simply ignore all the letters and phone calls and correspondence, or do you need to get an attorney? Do you need to fight the effort? You know, what's really your best recourse to go forward?
Probably shouldn't do anything at all. You know, I think sometimes that the greatest risk to consumers and individuals is that they do something before they understand their rights. And, you know, certainly if it starts being a problem, if you have other estate issues, you're going to want to get a lawyer involved. But a lot of times people don't want to do that. And realistically, there's an awful lot of good information online that will, if you just stop, give yourself some time, let yourself get to the point where that grief that's just blinding your, you know, faculties, right? You're not thinking straight when someone you love has just died. Give yourself some time.
You mentioned the obvious, the house, a car, maybe some credit card debt, but certainly if somebody has been sick for a while, and certainly that is often the case when somebody passes away, they have just recently racked up a tremendous amount of maybe hospice or hospital care or caregiving expenses, and I imagine that goes away as well, or does the family have to pay for that?
It's also like every other debt. It is a debt of the deceased person's estate. It is not a debt of the descendants or family members.
So what advice would you give to someone prior to their death or prior to the death of an older person that may be in your life? What preparations should somebody be taking now? Should they be getting things out of a co-signing type situation and into all of their own names? Or certainly writing a will or a trust is helpful, but if there's not a whole lot of money there, if they are in debt or, you know, with not a whole lot to pass along, should they be taking action now to protect their children and grandchildren?
Well, certainly to the extent that you could take some sort of action to get it into your name alone, that would be better. But usually if someone has someone co-signing who's also liable for the debt, it's very unlikely that the lender is going to let you do that. So I'm not sure how practical that is. I think the main thing is simply to plan ahead and document. I think the greatest risk to family members is they don't know. And they're confronted with a desk, file cabinets with paper spinning out of them, and they don't know where anything is. So probably the best thing you can do if you don't have the money to pay off your debts is to at least have a really clear list for your family of what you owe and who to contact so they can figure out what to do, and then always stop and take your time when someone dies.
Not the easiest conversation, but you have to have it. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us as well. We will continue here on Comcast Newsmakers Extended Edition right after this, so don't go away.
You've seen Comcast Newsmakers on CNN Headline News. Now you can watch them on Xfinity On Demand. It's easy. Push the On Demand button on your remote. Navigate to Get Local and select Comcast Newsmakers. Now you can watch in-depth interviews with politicians, public officials, and community leaders at your convenience. It's Comcast Newsmakers on Xfinity On Demand. Another way Comcast stays focused on the community.
Welcome back. Joining me now is an elder law attorney from Samasco law firm, Pat Samasco. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
What exactly is the definition of, or what does an elder law attorney do?
Well, elder law is a specialty that designed to protect families as they grow older in life. Protect from probate, protect their assets, to make sure that you have the paperwork in order, that someone's there that can make your decisions if you should get sick and can't make them on your own. And then ultimately protect you from any issues that may come up in the end, and then pass your assets down to your family as smoothly and as efficiently as possible.
Okay, so most of us have been encouraged at some point in our life. You might want to think about writing a will or
Right.
having a trust. Maybe we've even been talked to at a hospital here or there about an advance directive
Right.
or that type of thing. But what's really sort of, I don't want to say up and coming, but a popular topic right now is how do you protect your money if you have some that you might be leaving behind from a nursing home
Oh,
or from
yeah.
Medicaid. So what is that different then, or is that included in an estate plan?
No, it's a completely separate area. In most elder law attorneys, they take it up to a certain level. Just like if you have a family doctor, he may go to this level, but now you have cancer, you go to the oncologist. The area of law that's dealing with Medicaid plan is very, very complex, and you really need a specialist that does it. So the idea is that you protected your assets, you worked so hard, and you scrimped and saved. Now you're in the point where you may have to go to the nursing home, so let's give it all to the nursing home. So the idea is, what can you do to protect your assets so if you had to go to the nursing home, Medicaid would pay those benefits instead of having a private pay. Because right now the average cost of nursing home is about $8,500 a month. And not too many people have the assets to cover that, nor do they have the long-term care insurance that would be necessary to pay that bill.
But there is I know you could probably sit down with somebody for 3 hours and tell them on their individual circumstances
Right.
what they should be doing. But in general,
Right.
what should folks be thinking about doing if they think they
Yeah.
would like to protect themselves
Well,
from
the
that?
first thing is that people think that if they have a revocable trust, that is the solution to every single problem under the sun, and it's not. A revocable trust, just like a will or a power of attorney, is a tool in a toolbox. Revocable trusts avoid probate but do not protect assets from a nursing home. So the way that we do it is we use irrevocable trusts. We call them irrevocable asset preservation trusts, irrevocable homestead preservation trusts. And when you use these trusts and you place the assets into those trusts, they would be protected if you do it 5 years before you go into the nursing home. Because right now there's a 5-year look back.
All right, so you're protecting your own funds from perhaps going into a nursing home.
Correct.
Once you've done that, there's a million different things you need to be looking at
Right.
to protect, especially if you have a substantial amount of money
Right.
that you'd like to leave to someone.
Yep.
Some laws that changed this year that protect IRAs but
Yep.
don't protect IRAs. What should folks know about that?
Right, so here you are, when you're growing older, you are trying to protect your assets for yourself. Make sure that you have someone there that that can care for you and make your decisions for you. And then if you pass them down to your children, it's a brand new ball game. Originally, if you have an IRA or a 401k or a 403b, any type of retirement account, if you ever got sued, those accounts were protected from creditors and from bankruptcy. If you pass away and your spouse inherits those IRAs, it's a rollover, they're protected as well. Historically, when they passed away and it went down to the kids or the grandkids, those were protected because they were called beneficiary IRAs. But Michigan would protect them and Georgia wouldn't, and Alabama. So it's just different all over. And the Supreme Court came down last year in June and said that if a child or anyone other than a spouse inherits an IRA or a 401k or a 403b, they're no longer protected if the kids get sued or if there's a bankruptcy, because the Supreme Court said they're no longer treated as retirement accounts, and as such they're at risk. So to do that, the parents have to create the plan, and we call it an inheritance trust. It's still a revocable trust. The children are the beneficiary of the trust, but you put strings attached to them that says that they get the income, they get the principal if they need it, but if they get sued, it's not their money, it's the trust money.
Interesting.
Yeah, and if there's a divorce, it's not their money, it's the trust money. If they pass away, and this is what most parents don't realize, they want everything to go to their daughter, and if the daughter dies before them, it goes to her children or the grandchildren. 99% of the time, that's what mom and dad want. They don't realize that if daughter inherits and she passes away a day later or a year later, it goes to her spouse. And a lot of time that spouse is not the intended beneficiary, because the spouse is going to get remarried and next thing you know it's out of the family. So when you create this an inheritance trust, you can protect your spouse, you can protect your children, you can protect your grandchildren from creditors, bankruptcies, divorces, and that unintended beneficiary. It works fabulous.
So you used the word trust many, many times. I
Right.
haven't heard you say will yet. What's the difference between a will and a trust?
Okay, will, in my opinion, is the absolute least important document in the estate plan. People think it's the most important. Generally, it's not. If you have a will, so mom has 3 children, mom dies, the will says everything goes to her 3 kids. If you don't have a will, mom dies, everything goes to the 3 kids. So it's the exact same distribution. There's no need for the will. The trust dictates who gets your assets. Someone's there to watch over the assets if you have minor children or spendthrift beneficiaries without having to go through probate. So the will in the toolbox is really the least important. The trust, the medical power of attorney, the financial power of attorney, those are the key documents. But as tools, it's only a tool. So you have to make sure you're using the right tool. Revocable trust is used for this, irrevocable trust is used for that, special needs trust is used for other situations. Just like a hammer can't open up a screw, can't unscrew a screw, just like a revocable trust won't protect from the nursing home.
So at what point should somebody be thinking about estate planning, putting together a will or a trust?
Great question. You need to have all your power of attorney signed up before it's too late, and you need to have all your estate planning documents signed up before it's too late.
When is it too late?
When you become incapacitated or you pass away. So just before I came here, I had to sign up a medical power of attorney for a nice little lady. She's in a rehab hospital with MRSA. And I had to go in with the scrub, everything, and the rubber gloves, and that was a little bit late. Luckily, she didn't have any form of dementia. The second you do not have the mental capability to sign up the documents, dementia, Alzheimer's, strokes, Parkinson's, and you don't have the ability to sign these documents mentally or not necessarily physically, you lose the ability to do it. So when you should do it, you should do it now. You retire. The family that I had before that appointment, dad's 47 with MS. His wife just got diagnosed with MS at 45.
Wow.
They have a son that's 19 with autism and a 14-year-old. They should have done it.
But you never know, right? You
never
never know whether you're ill or not,
Yeah.
what tomorrow will bring. Thank you so much for joining us
Thanks
today.
for having me. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of our guests today for joining us on this edition of Comcast Newsmakers Extended, and thank you for watching.